They always said Sophia was the golden one. I laughed along, swallowed the bitterness, played the quiet sister. But on my mother's birthday, as they replayed a clip of me crying like a family blooper, I finally snapped. This wasn't teasing, it was execution. Every glance, every comment had a knife behind it. And then I found the photo album, my face missing from every childhood memory. Who erases a child like that? I thought I knew pain. I thought I knew them. I didn't. But I will. Because I'm about to uncover what they've buried. And when I do, they won't recognize the woman who returns. I drove back to the town I once swore I'd never return to, lulled by the promise of a simple family dinner for my mother's birthday. The house hadn't changed. A pristine white fence, perfectly trimmed hedges, and the same brass knocker that echoed through my childhood. Yet, as I stepped through the door, every smile that greeted me felt rehearsed, stretched thin like plastic wrap over something rotten. "Claire, you're here," my mother sang, wrapping me in a hug that ended before I could return it. Sophia was already in the living room, glowing as always in a designer dress, surrounded by relatives leaning in like moths to her flame. Her hair curled in soft waves, makeup flawless, the star of every family occasion. And I, the commercial break no one asked for. I gave my mother her gift, a first edition of her favorite childhood book. She smiled, polite, confused. "How thoughtful," she said, before gently setting it aside on the coffee table without another glance. Then Sophia stepped in, handing over a tiny velvet box. Inside, a diamond necklace. My mother gasped like she'd seen salvation. "Oh, Sophia, you shouldn't have. It's stunning," she beamed, already unclasping the pearls she wore to replace them with Sophia's gift. "You always know what I love." The room clapped. I smiled, mechanically. I'd spent 3 months tracking down that rare book, but who cared when Sparkle won over story? Dinner was a performance. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter rippled across the table like artificial waves. I sat wedged between two cousins who couldn't remember what city I lived in, across from Sophia, who seemed to sparkle even without effort. At one point, someone asked about my job. Before I could answer, Sophia chimed in. "Oh, Claire's still at that small courthouse, right? You've always liked the quiet life." I froze mid-bite. "I actually got promoted to senior court officer last month." "Oh, wow," she smiled sweetly. "That's adorable." The table chuckled, not meanly, just enough to sting. I turned to my wine glass instead of correcting her. Why bother? In this house, her voice was law and I was merely tolerated. Then came the cake. Candles. Singing. Mother blew them out, cheeks flushed with joy. "I'm so lucky," she said. "2 daughters. One who always shines." Her hand found Sophia's shoulder. She didn't look at me. Later, as the evening ebbed into after-dinner drinks and soft jazz, Sophia pulled out her phone. "Let's show Claire this," she giggled, opening a video. "Remember last year's New Year's Eve?" I knew the clip before it played. Me. Drunk. Slurring a monologue about being the forgotten daughter while dancing badly in my own apartment, filmed during a call with Sophia that I hadn't known was recorded. Laughter exploded. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. "That was fun," I said quietly, standing up. "Excuse me." I headed toward the hallway, but my father's voice stopped me. "Claire, come on. Don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke. Sophia knew you'd laugh too." I turned. "Why would she think that?" "Because she's thoughtful," he snapped. "Unlike you, who always takes everything the wrong way." There it was, the familiar cut, the tone that told me to shrink. Behind him, my mother murmured, "It was harmless, sweetheart. You're just dramatic sometimes." Then she added, almost under her breath, "You're always the difficult one, never like your sister." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I smiled. "I think I'll get some air." Outside, the night wrapped around me like a cooler, truer version of home. I wandered toward the study. Empty now. Inside, the familiar bookshelves stood untouched. Out of habit, I pulled down a photo album, one I hadn't seen since I was a teen. The pages flipped easily. Sophia in a tutu. Sophia at a piano. Sophia blowing bubbles. Sophia in my mother's arms. Sophia beside my father, on his shoulders, in his lap, kissing his cheek. Page after page. Not one of me. I turned each sheet with growing panic. Finally, a faded birthday party. Sophia in the middle. I stood beside her, slightly out of frame, my face half cut. That was it. I set the album down, hands trembling. I wasn't just the forgotten daughter, I was being erased. From behind me, a voice broke the silence, soft, female. If you knew who Sophia really is... I spun. It was Aunt Marie holding her wine, watching me like she'd been waiting years for me to ask the right question. What did you say? She smiled, tired, sad. Nothing, dear. Just talking to myself. But I saw it in her eyes. She knew something none of them ever wanted me to find out. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling in the guest room, the floral wallpaper as suffocating as the silence between those walls. Aunt Marie's words looped in my mind. If you knew who Sophia really is, what did she mean? And why now? The next morning, I walked the neighborhood. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. Houses that once towered over me now seemed fragile, old, like illusions you outgrow. A red brick building caught my eye. Thompson's Cafe, still standing. I pushed open the door and immediately recognized the man behind the counter. Mark Benson, my high school boyfriend. He glanced up, did a double take, and smiled. Claire Weston? He asked. In the flesh. We talked over coffee, easing into a conversation that once came effortlessly. He asked about my job, my life. I told him the truth, mostly. Then I asked cautiously, why did you really end things? He shifted uncomfortably. Honestly, it wasn't me. Your sister. She told me you'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Said your episodes were dangerous. She said your family didn't want anyone to know. My stomach dropped. She said that? I asked, my voice barely audible. She even showed me your old journal entries. I figured, if your own sister warned me, it must be true. I couldn't breathe. I had never been diagnosed with anything. The journals, my private thoughts, Sophia must have stolen them. I remembered one going missing after a sleepover at home. I'd assumed I lost it. Mark leaned forward. Claire, I'm sorry. I should have talked to you. No, I whispered. You believed her. Everyone always does. Outside, I sat in my car, shaking. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was sabotage. My own sister, smiling across tables and holding champagne flutes at birthdays, had been planting poison behind my back for years. That evening, as I returned to the house, I noticed my mother leaving in a hurry. She rarely drove after sunset. Curious, I followed at a distance. Her car wound through the town, finally pulling into a quiet residential street. She stepped out, approached a modest brick home, and rang the bell. A man opened the door. Older, tired-looking. My mother smiled like she hadn't in years. She hugged him, not a polite embrace, intimate, familiar. I waited until she left, then jotted down the address. Back home, I searched county records. The man's name, Richard Langley, a contractor, divorced, and, interestingly, the man my mother had been briefly married to before meeting my father. Something snapped into place. I searched further. A birth certificate, yellowed and scanned, Sophia Langley, born 2 years before my parents' wedding. Mother's name matched. Father, Richard. The room blurred around me. Sophia wasn't my full sister. She wasn't even my father's daughter. I sat down, heart racing. Suddenly, so many memories twisted into new shapes. How Sophia always got what she wanted. How Mother would snap at Dad if he questioned Sophia's choices. How, even in casual family jokes, Dad would say, "She's her mother's girl." I needed more. The next day, I visited the home of Mrs. Eileen, our former housekeeper. She'd been with our family for over a decade during our childhood. I brought flowers, hoping she remembered me kindly. She did. "Oh, Claire," she said, "you always had the loneliest eyes." We talked over tea, slow at first. But when I mentioned Sophia's birth certificate, her hands trembled slightly. "I'm not supposed to say anything," she murmured. Please, I said. I need to know who I am. She looked into my eyes for a long moment. Sophia was never your father's daughter. Your mother was married before, had Sophia, left the man, and met your father, but she never told him. He believed Sophia was his. But he always treated her better, I said. Why? Guilt, she replied. Your mother made him believe he owed her, and since Sophia was so charming, it was easier to believe the lie. My jaw clenched. All this time I thought I was failing to meet some invisible standard, but there was no standard. There was only a secret and a cover-up. Driving back, I couldn't stop trembling. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't jealous. I had been erased, sacrificed, silenced. And now I had proof. I reached home to find a plain envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. No return address. Inside, one line. They're hiding something far bigger than favoritism. Keep digging. The television glowed across the living room, casting light onto a family frozen in admiration. Sophia's face lit up the screen, dressed in a shimmering blue gown, smiling sweetly at the talk show host beside her. So, Sophia, the host chuckled, you always seem so confident. What was it like growing up with a sister? She paused just long enough to feel deliberate. Then she laughed, a soft, pitying sound. Well, she said, tilting her head, Claire was different, a bit of a loner, struggled to connect. But I think it taught me patience. Laughter, applause, a perfectly delivered punchline disguised as a compliment. My mother clapped. She handles the press so well, doesn't she? My hands tightened into fists. I stood up and walked out without a word. When I returned later that night, the house was quiet. I stepped into the kitchen where my mother was rinsing wine glasses. You let her say that? I asked. She looked over her shoulder. Say what? That I'm some broken thing she had to endure. Oh, Claire, she sighed. You're always so dramatic. She didn't mean anything. She meant every word. Even if she did, my mother snapped, drying a glass. Maybe you should think about why she feels that way. That was it. The mask slipped. You let her lie. You let her twist everything, and you stood there, smiling. You don't know what it's like to raise two daughters, she said coldly. No, I whispered, but I know what it's like to be erased by one. She walked toward me, hand raised. The slap cracked before I could react. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Sophia appeared in the doorway, looking perfectly concerned. What's going on? She asked, her voice trembling, eyes already glassy. My mother turned to her. She's being unreasonable again. Sophia stepped toward me. Claire, maybe it's time to stop blaming everyone for your sadness. Right, I said, breath short. Because I'm the problem. You always have been, she said softly. You hated me since we were kids. I just wanted to love you. Tears slid down her cheek. The performance was flawless. I walked past them both, grabbed my keys, and left. Back at my apartment, the mailbox was stuffed. Bills, junk mail, and one padded envelope with no return address. Inside, an old leather-bound journal. My father's. My fingers trembled as I opened it. His handwriting slanted slightly, firm and elegant. Pages of memories, notes on surgeries, reflections on parenting. Then, me. Claire is strong. She sees more than we give her credit for. She feels deeply but is told to shrink. I've let that happen. Another page. Sophia isn't mine. I always knew. She came with lies and stayed because I believed silence was love. My breath caught. I watched Claire fade, and I did nothing. I let her take the blame for storms she never caused. The final page. Claire, if you're reading this, it means the truth is finally breaking through. Don't stop. You're closer than you think. I dropped the journal. My ears buzzed. I couldn't tell if I was angry or numb. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't work. I drove without purpose, turning at random, letting the road lead. One night, fog curled over the hills. I lost the edge of the road, the forest creeping in like a dare. I pressed the gas harder, heart racing. Then a voice. Faint. Familiar. I stopped the car, trembling. From the glove compartment, I pulled out an old flash drive, one I hadn't recognized when I found it in Dad's box months ago. Plugging it into my phone, static burst through the speakers. Then his voice, hoarse but steady. Claire, I'm sorry I left you with silence. I stayed quiet because I thought it would protect you, but silence hurt more. I should have spoken. I should have fought. Please, don't stop looking. Not for me. For you. The recording ended. I sat in the driver's seat sobbing until I couldn't breathe. Then something slipped from the folder beside me. A photograph. Dad, younger, smiling, holding me in his arms. In the background, my mother, not smiling, facing away. Sunlight streamed through a window I didn't recognize. The sheets smelled like clean cotton and cedar. I blinked, confused, until I heard footsteps and a soft knock. You're awake, Mark said gently, stepping into the room with a glass of water. I sat up slowly. My head ached, memories flooding back in pieces. The fog, the drive, the photograph, my father's voice. Where am I? My place, he said. You showed up around midnight shaking. You looked like you hadn't slept in days. I stared at him, the man I once loved, the one who vanished after Sophia whispered poison. Why are you helping me? I asked. He hesitated. Then, because I owe you the truth. I believed lies about you, but I never stopped wondering. And when I saw you last week, I knew something wasn't right. I nodded, unsure what to say. He handed me the water, then sat on the edge of the bed. There's something I never told you, he said. The night I left you, Sophia sent me a video. You were crying, ranting about how your mother loved Sophia more. She said you had episodes like that often, that you'd been diagnosed and the family didn't want it public. I gripped the glass harder. But something felt off. The video, your voice, it was shaky, like it had been cut. It was, I whispered. She took my journals, stole private things, then edited what fit her story. Mark looked down. I wanted to believe her. She's convincing. But not honest, I said, and I've let her control the narrative long enough. He looked up. So what now? I stood. Now I stopped being her shadow. Over the next week, I didn't return home. I stayed in Mark's spare room, eating when I remembered to, sleeping when my body forced me to. The rest of the time, I worked. I started with the birth certificate, Sophia Langley, born 2 years before my parents' wedding. Mother's name, Evelyn Weston. Father, Richard Langley. Next, I went back to the county office and pulled property documents. My father's will, the estate transfer Sophia orchestrated 2 years ago when I'd been manipulated into signing away my rights. The signature wasn't even mine. I contacted Mrs. Eileen, our former housekeeper. Her hands shook as she signed a sworn statement, confirming Sophia's real parentage, the manipulation she'd witnessed, and my father's knowledge of the truth. I gathered screenshots of old emails between Sophia and a former family attorney, messages that implied coercion, gaslighting, and forged documentation. Then I found it. A draft email my father had written to the estate lawyer. It was never sent, but it was saved. I want to amend the trust. Claire must be protected. She's been denied too much for too long. It was dated 1 week before he died. Everything snapped into place. The injustice wasn't just emotional, it was legal, calculated, systemic. I had enough. With help from a friend of Mark's in legal affairs, I drafted an official letter to the family attorney. I was requesting a formal reopening of the estate case on the grounds of fraud, duress, and concealment. The court date was set for 6 weeks later, but that wasn't enough. I wanted the truth to live outside courtrooms, beyond sealed documents and dead signatures. I wanted the world to hear it. And so, I began writing my statement. Every memory, every lie, every wound, a testimony not just for justice, but for clarity. I chose the date carefully, my father's memorial. They always turned it into a spectacle. Speeches, flowers, Sophia sobbing just enough for sympathy. This time, I'd bring something real. 2 nights before the event, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "This is a mistake." Inside was a screenshot, an email from Sophia to her lawyer, dated 2 days ago. "If she opens her mouth on Sunday, I will burn this family to the ground. No one wins if the truth comes out." I stared at it, heart pounding. Even now, she was playing God. But for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt fire. The memorial was held at the Weston estate, just like every year. Overly manicured gardens, white chairs arranged in perfect symmetry, classical music humming softly from hidden speakers. Guests arrived in muted colors, greeting each other with tight smiles and practiced sadness. Sophia wore black silk. My mother clutched a bouquet of white lilies, eyes red but dry. I arrived last. Heads turned as I walked in. No invitation, no warm welcome, but no one dared stop me. I took a seat near the front, directly facing the podium. Sophia noticed me. Her mouth twitched, but she said nothing. When the speeches ended and the air fell into its usual ritual silence, I stood. "I have something to share," I said, voice calm, projecting just enough. Murmurs rippled. "I believe my father would have wanted you to hear this." I pulled a small remote from my coat and pressed play. A projector screen blinked to life behind me. My father's face appeared. Tired, older than I remembered, but unmistakably him. His voice filled the garden, cracked and earnest. "If this message reaches you, then I'm gone. And I hope it's Claire watching. I was weak. I let lies fester in our home. Sophia isn't my daughter. Your mother lied to me. But I chose peace over truth, and I let that decision cost Claire everything. I wish I had the courage to stop it. Claire, I hope you find the courage I lacked." Gasps filled the air. I let the silence stretch. Then I placed printed documents on the podium. Sophia's original birth certificate, my father's unsent email to his lawyer, and sworn affidavits from Mrs. Eileen. "My sister," I said, "is not a Weston by blood. My mother forged documents to protect her secret, and I was forced to sign away my rights to this family's legacy under false pretenses." Sophia stood abruptly. "She's lying!" But her voice cracked. My mother followed, hands trembling. "That's enough, Claire." "No," I said, stepping closer. For the first time in my life, I decide when it's enough. My mother's facade shattered. "You don't understand what it cost me to keep this family together." It wasn't a family. It was theater, and I'm done playing a role. Sophia tried to speak again, but I raised my hand. "And in case anyone's wondering who started all this..." I pulled out a second letter. The crowd leaned forward. It was a letter slipped into my mailbox. No return address, no name. I unfolded it slowly. It read, "They're hiding something far bigger than favoritism. Keep digging." I turned the page. The back held a second note, something I hadn't noticed until last night, scrawled in rushed, shaky handwriting. "Forgive me. I never stopped looking for her. Richard Langley." Sophia went pale. "My real father," I said, looking at her. "The man you were told to forget. The man you were told abandoned you. He didn't." There was no chaos, no screaming, just silence so thick it rang in my ears. I walked away. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I didn't need to. By nightfall, news had spread. The television show Sophia starred in released a statement. "We are terminating our partnership with Ms. Langley, effective immediately." Sponsors withdrew. Contracts dissolved. Within 48 hours, headlines read, "TV darling exposed, a life built on lies." As for my mother, a formal complaint was filed against her by the estate's legal firm. Fraud, coercion, misuse of trust documents. The community that once praised her as a pillar began to murmur in shame. But I didn't rejoice. I packed my bags quietly, collected the last of my things from the apartment I never made into a home, and prepared to leave the town that raised me and buried me in equal measure. I left a note in the hallway mirror before I left. "I don't need this house. I don't need this name. I don't need any of you." As I drove toward the horizon, the sun dipped behind the hills, golden light washing the sky. My phone buzzed. A new email, subject line. My father was Richard Langley too. I think we're sisters. Sender, Emily Langley. I pulled over. For a long time, I stared at the screen. And then I smiled. The town I moved to was nothing like the one I left behind. Ocean air salted every breath, and the gulls overhead didn't care who I used to be. The sea didn't ask questions. It just received me. I rented a small cottage near the cliffs where wind tangled in my hair every morning and waves whispered against stone. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to keep my voice low to avoid being too loud, too emotional, too much. There was no one to shrink for, but peace alone wasn't enough. I founded True Legacy 6 months later. The center helped women navigate the legal chaos of inheritance, fraud, coercion, stories too much like mine. I wasn't a lawyer, but I didn't need to be. I was proof. I brought in attorneys, trauma counselors, social workers. Word spread. Emails poured in, then letters, then flowers. Women wrote to say they'd found the courage to speak out because I had. A mother estranged from her daughter. A granddaughter who'd been cut out of a will after caring for her grandmother in secret. A widow who'd signed everything away because she'd been told she was lucky to have anything at all. I cried over some of those letters, laughed at others, but I answered every single one. Then came the interviews. First local papers, then national media. Someone called me the inheritance advocate. Another labeled me the phoenix from the will. I smiled politely, but the titles didn't matter. The women did. One afternoon, the front desk called me. A visitor, no appointment. I stepped into the waiting room to find Mrs. Levington, an old friend of my mother's. She was one of the many who had once told me I was too emotional to handle adulthood. She stood awkwardly, clutching a purse that didn't match her dress. "I came to say I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking. "I watched your live stream. I saw the truth. I didn't know. I believed what Evelyn told me. I'm sorry I didn't ask for your side." I paused. For years, I'd imagined this moment would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like closure. "I appreciate you coming," I said, "and I hope you ask more questions from now on." She nodded and left. Weeks later, I met Emily. She looked just like the man in that video. Richard's sharp jaw, soft eyes. We met at a cafe along the pier. She was nervous, her hands fluttering like pages in the wind. "I don't know what this means," she said, "but I had to reach out." "It means something," I said, "even if we don't know what yet." We walked the beach for hours. She told me about her life, raised by a single mother, always wondering why her father disappeared, never feeling like the full truth had been shared. When she saw my name tied to his, something clicked. We didn't cry. We didn't dramatize it. We sat in the sand as the tide rolled in, breathing in a silence that didn't demand answers, only presence. When I returned home that evening, I found a letter on my porch. No return address. Inside was a familiar handwriting. Sophia. Claire, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't even know if I deserve to be heard, but I need to say it. I was raised to survive, and survival made me cruel. I was terrified of being unloved, so I stole yours. I lied. I manipulated, and I envied you more than I could ever admit. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only hope you're free now. I hope you don't carry me anymore. Sophia. I sat with the letter for a long time. Then I walked to the fireplace and burned it. It was not vengeance. It was release. The next morning, I stood barefoot on the beach, wind tangling my hair. The sea roared like a chorus behind me. My toes dug into cool sand. For so long, silence had been my prison. Now, it was my peace. I closed my eyes. "I own the silence now," I whispered, and the wind carried it away.